We found out on Tuesday that the Chargers have met with one of the top edge rushers in the 2025 NFL Draft, Donovan Ezeiruaku, and it feels like he's very much in play at pick 22.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Droegemeier, and we've been covering the Chargers now for 9 seasons, but this is our 7th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen. To make sure that you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Well, Daniel, I think Charger fans everywhere would say that they were very excited that they were able to bring back Khalil Mack. That was a very important move, but it was only a one-year deal, and he is in the twilight of his career. So you have to start planning for life after Khalil Mack. So it does make sense for the Chargers to be in a market for another edge rusher. So that's why they meet with Donovan Ezeiruaku, who went absolutely crazy last season, 16 and a half sacks. That is some big-time major production, and he definitely wins with an element of his game that's not really in the Chargers edge rusher room right now. And we're going to talk about some of the building block players. On defense, there's several guys that are on the cusp of being guys that you can really, really rely on. And on offense, you have 4 guys that are already there that you can really build a football team around.
Yeah, and I think when you're talking about trying to contend for a championship, you need those building blocks in place, and we're also going to talk about which building blocks they need to add to get to that point. But anytime you have news with the Chargers, you know where to go because we're the only daily Chargers podcast out there, and it came out through an interview on the Draft Network with Justin Mello that Donovan Ezeiruaku formerly met with the Chargers at the Combine, and we know with the Chargers in the past, the meetings don't always mean, hey, they're going to sign you, and sometimes you hear from the guys they draft, I heard nothing from them. I didn't think they liked me, and then they picked me, right? And that's how it goes sometimes. But
a lot.
in this specific case with Donovan Ezeiruaku, the fit makes sense. The pick makes sense at 22 based on kind of where he's at on some of these big boards. And it would make a lot of sense why they would want a guy, David, with what you talked about. Khalil Mack on a 1-year contract, but Dupree in the last year of his deal. This is also a guy that has a chance to make an impact for you as a rookie and be kind of a cornerstone guy potentially for you going forward.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think edge rushers, as we know, are incredibly valuable. They impact the game pretty much every single time that they're able to step foot on the football field. If you have a good one, right, they get paid a lot of money because they change the way that the game is played and they affect the game at such a very, very high level. So the Chargers have to add some talent and some youth to that room. They need to find the heir apparent there. And if you look at, Donovan Ezeiruaku, there is some skills and some traits that get you really excited about what he has and what he brings to the table.
Absolutely. And the part that you touched on, complementing what they have in the edge room right now, because I think between Tuli Tuipulotu and Khalil Mack, you feel pretty good about the Chargers starting edge rushers going into 2025 and a big showcase for Tuli for sure.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that a little bit later. What you don't have is a guy that specifically wins with speed and bend. And if you're looking at this class, this is the dude you would point to as far as one of the guys that has those specific attributes. I mean, me and you were sending clips back and forth of each other of just the ability of him to get around a tackle and be able to flatten out to the quarterback and how easily he did it. And I mean, there's no surprise when you're seeing that kind of quickness and that kind of agility that he ends up having the best shuttle at the Combine at 4.19, the best 3-cone drill at the Combine at 6.94, all things that are a good measurement as far as how your agility and your quickness and your get off are going to translate to the next level. He can win like that. That's not the way Khalil Mack wins. Khalil Mack's a power guy. He has skills in his arsenal. Tuli Tuipulotu has a lot of skills as well. More of an effort guy, a high motor, play with your hair on fire type of physical player as well.
Yeah.
They don't have somebody that's threatening tackles with their speed. Both Tuli and Khalil Mack can do that, but that's not what they're known for. This guy has the edge to get the corner and win in that way, and it's one of the most valuable assets that you can have at the next level.
100%. I mean, we talked about the big-time production that he was able to put on tape and put on the stat sheet, 16 and a half sacks is insane.
21 tackles for loss too, which is a crazy number.
That is too. I mean, sacks are great. Tackles for loss, almost just as impactful. Putting those guys behind the 8 ball and forcing them to get out of what they want to do is definitely something that changes the game. And for me, also some really good arm length. He has 34-inch arms as an edge rusher. I mean, most tackles, you're looking at 34, 35-inch arms as something to be outstanding. So
the gold standard. Yeah.
Right. So 34-inch arms for an edge rusher is fantastic. Not only does he have good length, he knows how to use that length as well, and he uses it to great effectiveness. Obviously, he wins with tremendous bend, a skill that that really isn't in the repertoire of the room right now. Very sure tackler, only 5 missed tackles and an 8.1% missed tackle rate last season. Showcases a very quick first step that helps him win on the edge. He doesn't have the best sideline to sideline speed, but he's very accurate when he's traversing through traffic. Like
good
he
angles.
knows he's able to identify where the ball carrier is going to be, and then he gets to that spot and he gets that ball carrier down.
Yeah, and I thought that he just football IQ wise and staying home and discipline, I thought those were all things he showed well in this, especially when you're a defense that's recovering and had just improved so much and not giving up big plays and guys being exactly where they're supposed to be. You don't want to take a step back in that
Sounds
department.
familiar.
Yeah, it's something we had to watch not that long ago. But yeah, that big wingspan definitely helps him as a tackler. And I think the nice thing is he's athletic enough to be able to chase down and corral quarterbacks when he has to, which has not been a strength of the Chargers. Once the quarterback breaks that initial pocket, do you have guys that can go chase him down? He has that in him. I wish there was a little bit more urgency on chasing down on the backside.
The effort.
It's hard to tell because it always seems like he's moving the same speed. So like it's hard to tell if it's effort. Just that's kind of where he's at. But like you see his get off, the athletic ability is there. So maybe a little bit more juice as far as that goes. And I think he did show being able to lock people out, being able to use that length to his advantage. If you're talking about the cons, reasons to be concerned, reasons that this dude isn't a top 10 pick universally, right? Which with all the good things we've said about him, you'd think maybe he should be. Size could be a concern at the next level for sure, right? 6'2 and a half, 248 pounds. 248 pounds, that's kind of the new wave of edge rushers. You're going to look at the RAS and say, hey, 35th percentile, whatever it is. There's a lot more smaller edge rushers out there, and that's part of the reason that he can win with speed, right? And I'd also say, as far as cons, some all or nothing reps where he can lose and just hit the ground because he's trying to get the edge and doesn't get there. And the only other weird thing was just kind of him disappearing off the map in 2023. He had 8.5 sacks. So you have 2 8.5 sack seasons. It's something you're not going to get often with edge rushers coming out. So, you have 2 kind of top-end production seasons this year, obviously an All-American season. Right. But did only have 2 sacks in 2023. He spoke about it and said, I tried to do too much, whatever the case was. But those would be kind of where my concerns would start as far as, hey, what are the risks in taking someone like this at 22?
Yeah, and like I mentioned, like some of the effort as far as like running sideline to sideline, I think is probably not where, his skill set really shines the most. And then I think he probably could add a little bit of weight. He struggles to get off of kind of lead blocks, like one-on-one blocks from time to time, and run support. He can kind of get controlled and get moved out of the way if he doesn't win with that length initially.
Yeah, totally.
So, those are a couple of things. Other than that, I like the profile. I like the skill set. I like what he's able to bring to the table, and like how what he does complements what the Chargers like to do, because one of the things we know about Jesse Minter is he loves to rotate a lot of different players. And if you have a unique skill set that he thinks that he can utilize against a particular type of tackle, then he absolutely is going to do it.
Yeah, and that's the thing is with his skill set, you can see him getting time early, and you can see him being an impact player for you in 2025. This guy has my stamp of approval. I really liked what I saw. He's a guy where there's no real consensus right now about where he'll go. Some people have him, around a top 10 pick. Some people have him as an end of the first round pick, maybe a trade back option for the Chargers. But I really liked what I saw. But I agree with you as far as when he didn't win with the length, when guys got into him and locked onto him, he can get pushed around a little bit. And that's where you see kind of the size being a concern. I think the nice thing for the Chargers is he has some real flashes of absolute, dominance in the run game as well. It's inconsistency there that's hurt him, and obviously the size a little bit. But you have maybe, the 2 guys with the potential to be the top run defending edge duo with Tuli and Khalil Mack right now. So that part is at least, makes you feel a little bit better about that specific flaw and something it feels like he could work himself into and get a lot better at. But edge rusher is a key building block for a contending team. And today we're also going to look at what building blocks the Chargers have going into the draft. Who are the young players? Who are the pieces that they can build around in upcoming years? And we're going to talk about the defense first, including if Tuli is really that guy. Coming up and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. Imagine watching your favorite team live, feeling the energy of the crowd, and witnessing unforgettable moments. There's nothing like experiencing a big game in person. Getting tickets shouldn't be stressful, and that's where GameTime comes in because it makes it easier than ever to grab last-minute seats at unbeatable prices. GameTime Picks gives you what you need when you get on the app, seeing not just all of the great deals that GameTime has available, but truly it separates what is going to be exactly what you need for the price range that you need, the deals that are at the top end of where their value is. And that's why I love GameTime Picks, because it really makes it a lot easier because GameTime has so many tickets available for these events. And I just checked the GameTime app, and there's so many things that I want to do just this weekend just by looking at it. You look at it and you're like, okay, well, now I have plans. And that's one thing me and you have talked about with GameTime is like creating memories. And me and you each have really fond memories of tickets that we bought with GameTime. And that's the best part because you get the GameTime guarantee. You know you're getting the best price, and you can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. That's LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, David. Well, one of the things we wanted to talk about today was just looking at the Chargers building block players. A lot of times we're talking about where they have needs, but the thing that gets kind of murky about that is some needs are short-term, and just because you don't have a need at somewhere right now doesn't mean that it's not going to be a need for you down the road. And as we look at this Chargers team who under Jim Harbaugh is trying to take that next step into becoming a true Super Bowl contender, I think it's important to look at who your building blocks are, what positions you have those building blocks at, because some positions are more valuable than others, and also where do you need to add those building block players so that you can build a Super Bowl roster. And that's where we wanted to start. And since we talked about edge rusher, that is one where the Chargers could add one because you always need one, and I think they will continue to need that right now. But when you look at the guys that are already there, the guys you would say, these guys you can build around over the next couple of seasons. So no one-year contracts for the most part in this. Outside of, offensively, Rashawn Slater going into the last year of his deal. But besides that, these are guys that are going to be here for the next couple of seasons. So if you're looking at the defensive side, to me, the clear-cut options at the top are Derwin James and Deion Henley.
100%. I mean, that's absolutely the two superstars in the middle and, obviously the back end, but more so up close to the line of scrimmage that you have on your football team with Derwin James and Deion Henley. And Derwin James was fantastic last year. He went back to his all-pro form. One of Jesse Minter's missions going into this season was, I need to restore greatness to your name and remind everybody how great of a player you absolutely are. And he definitely did it. Derwin James was his all-world self last season. He was all over the place. An 80.5 overall grade, 76.7 pass rush grade, 88.6 run defensive grade, 75.5 coverage grade. I read all those out just to demonstrate that no matter what you asked Derwin James to do last year, he was able to do it at such a high level. 93 tackles, 5.5 sacks, 10 tackles for loss, and 7 passes defensed. And what he was able to do, locking up tight ends in conjunction with Deion Henley last year, was nothing short of amazing. They were fantastic. Derwin James was back to his all-pro self last season.
He absolutely was. And I think you bringing up what they did to tight ends is an important point because you see kind of what having those two guys together can do and what that can take away from opposing offenses and how that helps you against the teams that have some of the elite tight ends in the game. And you have two guys can match up with them. This is a place where Khalil Mack would be 2 years ago, right? Khalil Mack, obviously on a 1-year deal. He's the type of player you're looking for. He is a building block player. He's just now, in the twilight of his career, really potentially the last season of his career, going into every season at this point. He would be that guy, but I think those two guys would be the clear-cut guys where there's no argument for me on the other side. Those are building block players. maybe not at the most valuable positions, right? Inside linebacker, not one of the most valued positions, as you can see by the contracts they get paid. Safety the same, but Derwin's kind of an outlier there because he's so much more than just a safety. I mean, he's an all-pro slot cornerback if you read the AP. So I think the nice thing about the defense is you have a lot of guys that are right there. Either maybe you need to prove it a little bit more, or even you potentially could make the argument for right now. So that's why we did the in the cusp part of this, because the Chargers could have more than potentially half their defense right now being building blocks for what makes this eventually a championship defense, because that would put Tuli Tuipulotu on this list, and I think there's an argument to be made that he is a building block right now. The two rookies, Cam Hart and Tarheeb, still just wanting to see a little bit more. And I think you could throw Elijah Molden somewhere in the middle of these two, because as on a 3-year deal with how impressive he was last year, he feels like he could be a building block guy too.
Yeah, I mean, the future is very, very bright for the Chargers defense as far as players that you see traits and see production from that really is on the doorstep of breaking out, and players that you would feel really, really excited about and really comfortable with seeing what their, kind of projections are going to be if they stay on the trajectory that they're on right now. Yeah. Cam Hart in 11 games, only 2 missed tackles and 460 snaps, and really brought the boom. I mean, he utilized his size and was kind of an enforcer out of that secondary, that cornerback group for sure. When you played against Cam Hart, you absolutely felt it because he was coming to take your head off, and I absolutely loved it. And then with Tarheeb still, 12 missed tackles and 785 snaps, but with the missed tackles came the 4 interceptions and the 4 pass breakups. So he took a couple of chances here and there, but he was able to get the game-changing plays that give you a lot of confidence and a lot of excitement for what his game can be. Although when I watched the tape in college, and I think you'll echo this, he was a pretty sure tackler. So I feel like this is something that can get back to the norm as far as that's concerned. But you see the ball production, you see the tackling ability from Cam Hart. Those two guys getting drafted in the 5th round, getting a ton of starter snaps, showed already that they have skill sets that you should be very excited about. And if they're able to just continue that growth, continue that transition or that trajectory, then they really can turn themselves into some building block players that you could be very excited about.
Absolutely. And, guys who play one of the most expensive defensive positions out there, I mean, especially seeing what Derek Stingley just got paid $30 million per season now playing corner. So
big money.
Tarheeb still, it's hard because the games we watch, he definitely tackle well, right? And that doesn't always tell the whole story. Sure. He has the want to, he has the physicality to do it. But Cam Hart, we wanted to see more physicality of in the preseason going into the year, and he ended up making maybe some of the biggest hits we saw from any Chargers defender all season. The most interesting one here is Tuli. Tuli is a guy that, with 8.5 sacks last year on its surface looks really nice, and you'd say, hey, he had the most sacks on the team. Khalil Mack was the better edge rusher of the two of them when you look at the advanced analytics and actually how much they won, how many pressures did they force, all of those things. Tuli did pick it up down the end of the stretch, or towards the end of the season, though. Multiple pressures in each of the last 4 games, including the playoff game as well. The thing with him, 31% missed tackle rate. That is just the part that's going to kill you every time. It was way too big. It's what really dragged down his run defense grade, because we know that he's a really solid run defender and a very physical run defender. That took a huge hit because of all the missed tackles. So that's something he's going to get the chance this year to show he's a building block player, and we both believe he's going to do that. But that's the only thing that stops him from being in that first part of this where we know about it for sure. And I do think when you're looking at what now, building blocks that need to be added, to me, there's 2 of them. To me, it's edge rusher, which is why we talked about Donovan Ezeiruaku, right? And potentially an edge rusher at 22. But the other one is a defensive tackle.
Defensive line.
And getting that building block player on the inside. Puna was the closest thing they've had to it, but they haven't had a dominant defensive interior pass rusher in 20 years, 15 years. 7 sack season from Corey Liuget. Jamal Williams, obviously more known as a run stuffer. I mean, you're probably talking about guys like Luis Castillo, right? Or someone like that. It's been a long time. Then you look at the Super Bowl teams. Who do they have? The last 4 Super Bowls. The one team that has 2 of them has Chris Jones. Yeah. The Rams had Aaron Donald. And we saw what the Eagles had last year with Jalen Carter and guys like Milton Williams and all of those.
Just got paid a gazillion dollars,
Those are where now, David, you want to find those building blocks going forward as you try to take that next step defensively.
Yeah, I mean, I think you like what you have in the cornerback room. You obviously have some incredible talent in the safety room, but you definitely need another blue chip player on the edge room, a younger one, and especially the defensive line. It's been so long since they've had such like an impact player, a guy, of like serious renown that you have to worry about, that you have to game plan around in a very long time. So they have to secure that guy for sure.
And the thing is if you hit on one of them, like if you want to buy one, we just sold Milton Williams, right? It's going to cost you $26 million plus a season. And he didn't have, he hasn't always been that guy either. He had a really breakout season this year. It costs a lot. If you can hit on a rookie doing that, you're going to have it pay off for you tenfold. And also, if you really want that to happen, you're going to have to spend a premium resource to get it done. And this is a good defensive tackle draft to do it, it seems like. But the offense is a little different because there's not very many guys on the cusp, but they do have 4 foundational players, and that's more than enough to build an elite offense. We're going to talk about that and more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. David, we still have more to get into with these foundational building block players, the players the Chargers can build around as they try to turn this team into a contender. And I mean, we're going to talk about 4 guys today, either on the cusp with the corners or guys that are firmly entrenched as building block players that Joe Hortiz added last year. So it'll be about how many more can you add this year? Because you got 4 in the last draft class. You got 10 picks coming up in this draft class. But as always, thank you guys for making us your first listen as the only daily Chargers podcast out there. And if you need a second listen, make sure to check out the guys at Locked On NFL Draft as they get you ready for the upcoming draft and tell you about all the players the Chargers could potentially need with our guys Keith Sanchez and Damian Parson. We're planning on getting one of those guys on the show probably next week. So you can find that on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast from. The foundational building blocks on offense were easy, right? Like, let's just put it like that. I mean, it's 4 guys and then everybody else. And the difference, I think, between this and the last segment is I feel very confident that Ladd McConkey and Joe Alt have already elevated themselves into building block players even after one season. Both guys started through the entire season. Both guys were basically top half in the league at their position. I mean, Ladd McConkey, Joe Alt, 2 guys who were borderline elite as rookies. And then you have Justin Herbert and Rashawn Slater. And David, it is 4 players, and 4 players don't make an offense. And as we saw last year, they had all 4 of those guys and still had plenty of issues. But I think the important thing about this is you have those guys at the most important positions offensively. These are the 3 highest paid positions. These are the 3 positions that when you're talking about what are most important and you're talking general managers and coaches, what do you need? A star quarterback, bookend tackles to feel great about, and a wide receiver 1. They have all of those things.
Yes, they absolutely do. I mean, look how many teams in the NFL have wasted draft pick after draft pick after draft pick on a quarterback, trying to find the right guy, trying to find their next franchise leader. The Chargers have that clearly with Justin Herbert. He is a monster. You built a quarterback from the ground up. It looks like Justin Herbert, 6'6", 240, 250 pounds, an academic Heisman, rocket arm, incredible processor, unbelievable strength and durability and heart. Like, he has all of those things. He has everything that you want in a quarterback. Definitely. Rashawn Slater, an absolute monster at left tackle. You want to know how good Rashawn Slater is? Look at how many left tackles they tried to cycle through until they found him. It was about 6 or 7 players in the last 10 years alone. Rashawn Slater came in and was immediately one of the best tackles in the league. And last year, Rashawn Slater was unbelievably good. 3 sacks and 547 pass blocking snaps, only 22 pressures allowed. You know what's even crazier about that? Joe Alt gave up less pressures than Rashawn Slater did last year. He gave up 20. Obviously, he gave up more sacks. Joe Alt gave up 6 sacks last year. But when you look at his stats combined, and you take out all the left tackles there, about 500 snaps, Joe Alt is the 5th highest rated right tackle in the NFL as a rookie after one season. That's how good Joe Alt is coming into it. And we all saw what Ladd McConkey did. I mean, Ladd McConkey was an absolute monster. But to have a quarterback, to have 2 bookend tackles that are young that you can have on those, for a long time, man, that's a great foundation already to start your offense.
It is. And I think if those are your 4 best offensive players, you can have an elite offense. And I think that's the frustrating part of us not seeing that last year, and really kind of where the drop off is after those top 4 guys, because then you start kind of looking around for building block players elsewhere on the offense. And where is it, right? Probably the closest thing is maybe Mekhi Becton, just because of his age, but he's even a guy that only has done it for 1 year and did it in a perfect ecosystem. Quentin Johnston can't put his name in that hat, obviously, with the playoff performance and just kind of the inconsistency there. Maybe he's one of the closer ones. But you don't have young kind of building block players on the interior of your offensive line right now. You have Zion Johnson going into the last year of his deal. No one else that's really, has the prospects or was drafted to be more than what they are right now. And then after that, like, where do you look? The tight end, you don't have the guy of the future in that room right now. You have Will Dissly for the next couple of years, and you love Will Dissly for what he brings. But
yeah,
I think the problem was last year is it was those 4 guys, and they weren't able to still have a truly, really good offense, even with 4 guys we know are really, really good. So Najee Harris, right, 1-year deal. Mekhi Becton, 2-year deal. Andre James, 1-year deal. Those are guys that are placeholders while you try to find the next building blocks on offense. And that's what I wanted to talk about now, is just what has to be added. And I think for me, the biggest one, David, has to be a weapon. Finding one more building block weapon to go along with Ladd McConkey, because if you look at where the weapons are and who are the building block players there, you have one between running back, tight end, and wide receiver, which you probably want even 2 of those guys at wide receiver if you can, obviously.
Yeah.
You only have one other building block weapon. So if I'm looking at where the Chargers need to add that, to this roster and find that other building block, that's a position, a weapon of some sort, pass catching tight end or wide receiver.
I'm with you. I'm with you 100%. I think, hey, you look at the Bengals, how much money they just paid to 2 wide receivers. It's about $70 million per season. I'm not saying to go out there and go spend that type of money, because that's just not what the Chargers and under Joe Hortiz and Jim Harbaugh are going to do. That's just not their philosophy. They do, however, believe in drafting their players and re-signing their players. So they need to go find that next weapon in the draft. That pass catching tight end you can pair with Justin Herbert, that young running back that you can pair with Najee Harris, and see what that does, and see if you like Najee. If he performs well, then you keep him around. He's still young, has a lot of carries on that body. But yeah, I'm fully with you. I mean, hey, I wouldn't mind another offensive lineman, right? I mean, the Chargers.
That's where you would go next, I think.
Yeah, that would be the next thing, absolutely. But yeah, I want a serious pass catching tight end to add to that group for sure.
Yeah, if I'm adding to that list after that, we'll see what happens with Mekhi Becton. If that turns, guards can play well into their 30s, so if you can get him signed. But you're also going to have to pay top dollar for it, right? And the draft gives you an option to potentially find a building block player and get him for 4 years on a very reasonable contract, which is what's so alluring about it.
Yes.
My next one would probably be a center. And I don't know if that guy exists. Maybe if they went Gray Zabel at 22 and they feel like he can be that guy. But Corey Linsley, when they first got him, felt like a building block player.
Oh,
and
definitely.
Because he could elevate those around him, not just the guard standing next to him, I mean the running back as well, but also the quarterback, and how much he helped Justin Herbert too. So if you're talking about building block players, a weapon definitely up there, 1 or 2 weapons. If you're including running back, it would be nice to get 2 more of those guys you feel good about going forward, and cheaper players that can go along with Justin Herbert's very expensive contract that's only going to go up the next couple of years. Those are where I would go. But the next best thing to me would be very alluring, if it was even available, is center, man. Because Corey Linsley was such a difference maker for this team. Finding the next Corey Linsley would be very high on my list too.
I'm with you. That's an easy one. With Corey Linsley,
I mean, you're not going to get Corey Linsley, right? I'm saying specifically Corey Linsley because that's the one we saw.
No, I know.
Much help. But finding that level, right?
Finding that type of player that's a force multiplier in the middle of your offensive line, a guy that makes everybody better, that commander, that's definitely the type of player that it's easy to see how it's going to make everybody better. They greatly miss Corey Linsley and his ability to find somebody who has that type of impact, not necessarily Corey himself, but that type of impact would pay huge dividends and would have ripple effects throughout the offense.
Which sucks because we should still, like he should still be around. It just sucks so bad what happened to him.
It
Man,
does.
he was still playing at such a high level, and you hate to see him have to go out in that way just because it's basically getting taken away from him.
Not on your own terms, yeah.
You wanted Jeff Saturday for your Peyton Manning. You wanted David Andrews to your Tom Brady. You wanted Creed Humphrey to your Patrick Mahomes, right? Like, those aren't coincidences. Great corner, great center, great quarterback combos have won a lot of games for teams throughout the year. So weapon for sure, but getting that guy in the middle to elevate the guards and have you not have to worry about that as much, maybe not have to spend as much on those spots because you feel so good about who you have in the center. And you could elevate those two players not only with your great center, but also your, elite level tackles. That has to be pretty up there as far as where you would go as far as building block players to turn this team into a true contender in 2025 and beyond. And that's the question now is, how many can Joe Hortiz get in this draft class? Because with $90 million, he told you he didn't think those building block players were there in free agency, or you weren't going to be able to get them at the price you needed them to be. The draft is where it's going to have to come, and we've seen it with their approach. They didn't take the big swings, and they did a very responsible job in free agency, very prudent. Their deals aren't going to hurt them financially in the future, more than likely. But when you don't get those top players, you better be sure you can hit on those draft picks, and you believe that he can, and we have the faith that he can do it. But they've put the onus on that now by not going after the big deals, but not trading for a DK or getting a Devontae or these guys. You have to find those guys now in the draft, and if they can, they're going to be in business, and they'll be much closer to contending in 2025. But that's going to wrap things up for today's show. Make sure you guys are back with us tomorrow because it is your team every day. And one of the things we want to get into is an AFC West roundup, talking about what the other teams have done in free agency in this offseason so far, because there's a lot that's been going on. And if the Chargers have kept up or maybe even closed the gap with the Chiefs at all. But make sure for any news, you know where to go, and that's the Locked On Chargers podcast, which you make sure you never miss by subscribing or following for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listening wherever you get your podcast from, as well as hitting us up on Twitter at Locked On LAC, where we post the show every day, on Instagram at Locked On Chargers, and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. But make sure you guys are back here tomorrow for the latest Chargers news and everything Chargers related. But until then, take it easy and go Bolts.